but it does not matter when you decide to give your life to Christ. Chapter 15, and then it happened. Mark 8:34-38. And when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and accept his cross and follow me. Suddenly, I looked out of the corner of my eye. Who did I see moving out of the position to welcome the newcomers and assemble himself next to our friends? My husband. I could not believe what was happening right in front of me. My husband had decided for both of us to join this ministry. My body went numb. I am thinking, what is he doing? This could not be happening. This was an especially weighty decision he was making, not just for him, but me as well. 100 emotions were going through me. Anger was the biggest one of them. I could not believe he would do this without my consent. While I was standing there staring at him like I saw a ghost, he was motioning me to come and join him. My feet were stuck to the floor like glue. I could not move at that moment. There was nothing inside of me telling me this was okay to do. I may have stood there for only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. What on earth is he doing? It seemed time stood still, and everyone in the church turned in my direction, waiting for my response. When I realized they were staring at me, I began to feel uncomfortable. I turned my head in the direction of my husband, giving him this, I am going to have words with you later. The music seemed to soften as if they were my key to walk up to the front and join the others. I thought to myself, it is time to make a move. I could not just leave my husband standing there. With reluctance in my feet and heart, I began to position myself out of my seat and walk toward the pastor. The church erupted with joy as I was making my way up to join the others. I remember having this half a smile on my face. I simply could not believe what was happening. The pastor took me by my hand and welcomed me to the church. My husband had tears streaming down his face. In my mind, I'm thinking, he is crying because I'm going to get him when we get home. Or he was simply happy that I committed to being a part of the ministry. Nonetheless, there I was standing in front of the congregation, all eyes staring at me as the pastor began to go through the formality of extending an invitation to all that came to be a part of the church. My husband moved closer in my direction as the pastor was speaking to all of us in one voice. After we all were officially installed into the ministry, the pastor asked each one of us to tell the congregation a little bit something about ourselves and why we were moved to become members of the church. Seeing that I was the last to come up, he started from the end where our friends were assembled. My friend's husband spoke first, and then she spoke afterwards, expressing her reasons and desires for becoming members. I remember standing there in a fog thinking how they were going to benefit the ministry, knowing that they would be going home. Then my attention quickly turned to what I was going to say when it was my turn to express my reasons for becoming a member of the church that I knew so little about. After all, this was not what my intentions were when we came to enjoy an evening worship. My husband then turned to share some information about himself and the reason he made such a commitment. I was anxiously waiting to hear his response. My husband is a sensitive person who can easily get emotional when he's in an upbeat mood. When he spoke, I listened to him attentively to hear what he was going to say. Although I was listening, there was still a little bit of anxiety going on within me because I was caught off guard. He then spoke the words with a strong voice. I was led to this church by the Spirit of God. It was something about how he said those words that made me take notice at that moment. We had been married for over 30 years, and I knew him quite well, knowing he would not have made this decision if he had not consulted the Lord. My body was tense from the moment I came to the front of the church. Looking into his eyes, I could see without a doubt he made a conscious decision. My body began to relax, and I took a deep breath. The pastor handed me the microphone to speak. At that very moment, all I could do was to look into the face of all the people that were staring in my direction at me, waiting to hear what I was going to say. The Lord had relieved me from all the anger and anxiety that had ravished my body, and I said to the people of God, if the Lord has spoken with my husband and directed us to this church, therefore it was not for me to question the will of God. I stand with my husband. I know there's a reason God sent us here, and it is not for me to question God's reasons. I shared with the congregation that the Lord sent us here from Florida for a purpose. We were not sure what the purpose was, but we knew that at some point it would be revealed to us. I recall sharing with them about being on dialysis and waiting patiently for the Lord to bless me with a new kidney. At that moment, I recall telling them that God would heal me by faith. When I am enthusiastic about something, I speak with conviction and confidence. It was as if I was roaring through the church in a monotone. I felt in that moment that shouting it out to the world, God was going to heal me, would make it so. The excitement of my voice must have inspired them to rejoice with me. The musicians brought the music up to a high tempo, and the church exploded. At that moment, there was no more room for doubt. This was the place that God meant for us to be. Praise God, thank you, Jesus, for giving us a new church. I thought to myself, after I finished speaking, the pastor stated we would be officially introducing all the newcomers to the church that following Sunday. The secretary at the church took down our personal information, such as address, phone numbers, etc. We were instructed at that point to return to our seats, and the pastor shortly afterwards dismissed the church for the evening. Immediately, the members came over to welcome us with hugs and handshakes. They came one by one, showing themselves friendly. It was a joyous moment that was so unexpected, considering I had no warning when coming for an evening service. I would become a member of a church that we were visiting. I was simply left with no choice but to be obedient to God and my husband. As the Spirit of God was leading him, obedience is better than sacrifice. 1 Samuel 15:22. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. When we got home, I expressed to my husband that God had been directing us ever since we left home. There was no reason for me to doubt any decision that was being made at this point. It was clear that this is where we were going to be placing our membership. I woke up the next day feeling a sense of calmness and assurance that what we did the night before was the right thing. It was a beautiful day, and the sun was beaming through the front windows. My husband had just awakened, and I was in the kitchen making the morning coffee. As I sat in the family room waiting for the coffee to brew, I began thinking about how good it was to be back in ministry, but not having quite the responsibilities as we did in our own church. My husband joined me in the family room, and I poured a cup of coffee for him as well as myself. We talked about what happened the night before. He attempted to explain to me why he was led to become a part of the ministry. I stopped him before he can go any further. I told him there was no explanation necessary. For whatever reasons, this was the right thing to do. As we sat and enjoyed our coffee in the morning fellowship with one another, my phone beeped, and it was a text message. The text message said, "I know you don't know me. I hope you don't mind, but I got your number from the pastor's wife." The text message was lengthy. It continued to say, "I was in the service when you and your husband joined last night. I was very moved by your testimony regarding your kidney. I have been up since 4 o'clock a.m. waiting for an enjoyable time to call you. I would like to speak to you about becoming a kidney donor." She went on to say, "Would it be okay if I call you on my lunch hour about noon?" I responded, of course it would be okay. I looked at my husband with disbelief, showing him the text. A stranger called me and wanted to tell me about becoming my kidney donor. Who is this person? We both wondered, was this a joke? We just joined this church the night before. We knew no one in this church other than our friends that would be leaving the following week, headed back home. Nonetheless, with excitement, my husband and I began to shout for joy, thanking God in advance. We took nothing lightly, anxiously waiting for noon to come for her phone call. A donor for me after being on dialysis so long? Could this be happening? I shudder to think of the possibility. We both began to try and figure out, who is this person? Who could it be? There were so many people greeting us after we joined church the night before. Of course, all we had to do was wait until noon. We would know who the person was. Suddenly, God dropped a face in my spirit. It was the lady with beautiful gray hair that greeted us at the front door. I did not have a way of knowing that, but at the same time, I felt she could be the one. It did not matter. All we knew was a person texted us in this incredible news, and we were going to celebrate. The fact that someone cared enough to have thought to help us. I called our friends to share this with them and what happened, and they were in disbelief as well. It seems as if time stood still when we were waiting for the clock to move. Finally, noon came and the phone rang right on time. It was amazing, not 12:01, but noon on the dot. When I answered, she began to share with me who she was and what prompted her to call me. Not totally surprised, it was indeed the lady at the front that greeted us as I expected. I had the phone on speaker to allow my husband to hear the conversation. I remember giving him the thumbs up when we realized it was indeed her. She went on to say, I have been up since early this morning. God would not let me sleep. I tried to go back to sleep, but the Lord would not allow me. I want to be evaluated to see if I could be a match for you. I know you do not know me, but now this is something I want to do if you would allow me. Your testimony was so profound, and I agree with you. God has a mighty work for you, and whatever I can do to help you, I am willing. I was so lost for words with what she was saying to me. Tears were streaming from my eyes as well as my husband. No one had offered to do this for me. Of course, my husband would have moved heaven and earth, but he was not a suitable candidate. I was simply overwhelmed with the gesture. She said she would talk about what the next steps would be if I would be willing to let her try. I told her as my voice was cracking because of what was happening at that moment. There were no words of thanks for what she was willing to do. I accepted her offer and we agreed to talk later when she got off work. When I hung up the phone, my husband and I began to rejoice and give God the glory. Just the possibility alone was too much for my head to comprehend at that moment. A stranger called my house and offered to give me a part of her body. Who does that? A big piece of the puzzle that I did not see coming. What a mighty God we serve. This was on a Wednesday, the following day after we joined the church. We were going to be officially introduced to the full congregation that Sunday morning. It had only been 24 hours and God was working miracles while we slept. I call them night seas. The thing that is so amazing and impressive to the spiritual faith can work through the night while you're sleeping.